I'm Ethan Cole, 34. My ex dumped me over dinner, bragging her new man was flying her first class to Rome. He was my MBA intern, and he put it on our corporate Amex. If you were 34, what would you say at dessert? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even blink. I just folded my napkin, set it down next to my untouched tiramisu, and said, "Enjoy your flight." The restaurant was one of those candlelit spots in Capitol Hill, just upscale enough to pretend it didn't care about being upscale. Exposed brick wine bottles with wax dripping down the neck servers, who memorized the specials and whispered them like confessions. Jenna had picked it, said she wanted a proper send-off. I thought she meant something else. She looked stunning. I'll give her that. Hair pulled back, dress burgundy, and sharp eyes glowing like she was already halfway across the Atlantic. She didn't touch her wine too excited, maybe. Or maybe too pleased with the reveal she'd been rehearsing. "He's taking me to Rome," she said, cutting into the silence after the entrees. "First class. Direct from Seattle. He said I deserve a city with fountains and real pasta." He tilted my head. "Nice." She leaned forward, elbows unapologetically on the table. "It leaves at 7:45 tonight." I glanced at my watch. 6:30. He booked a suite at a place off Via Veneto. 5-star. "You should look it up. We'll land tomorrow morning." Still no reaction from me. She was waiting for some explosion, some clumsy monologue about betrayal. But I'd already started doing mental math SEA to FCO departure times. Who could afford that kind of flex? And most importantly, who had access? "How long have you been seeing him?" I asked, only to confirm what I already suspected. "Does it matter?" she shrugged. "He knows what he wants. He's not afraid to invest in it." There it was. I almost smiled. Not because of the insult, but because I had a feeling I knew exactly who she was talking about. I stood up, dropped a few bills to cover the untouched dessert, and said, "Don't miss boarding. The Rome lounges close early." I walked out before she could say anything else. On the ride home, I didn't replay her words. I replayed his. Brandon Park, 27. Summer MBA intern. Whip-smart charming, knew how to fill a room without talking too much. He'd gotten a coveted rotation on one of our European strategy pods. I'd personally approved his temporary corporate Amex. It wasn't standard to give interns a card, but the project involved late-stage vendor meetings in Brussels and Paris. Flights, lodging, local transit, easier to centralize expenses for reconciliation. We gave him a 10 to 1,000 cap, with real-time monitoring through the expense portal. Any out-of-policy charge would flag red. Apparently, he thought he'd found a workaround. When I got home, I dropped my coat and went straight to my desk, pulled up the dashboard. The portal was quiet most days. Not tonight. 3 charges stared back in bold: $20,300 to an airline with a SIA FCO routing, $11,480 to a 5-star hotel off Via Veneto, $1,400 in a cash advance pulled at SEA International. I rubbed my jaw. The timestamp on the last transaction was barely an hour old. The plane hadn't taken off yet, but it would soon. And once it cleared United States airspace, I'd have leverage. Terminating an employee mid-flight isn't something you ever plan, but in this case it was necessary. I leaned back in my chair. The glow from the screen made the apartment feel colder than it was. Outside, Seattle's misty drizzle beaded against the windows, blurring the lights from South Lake Union. I knew I could revoke the card right then, shut everything down and cause a scene at boarding. But that would give them time to pivot. Jenna would call her father, or Brandon would swipe his personal card and claim it was a misunderstanding. No. I needed them locked in, thousands of feet above ground, past the point of return. Until then, I waited. I watched the aircraft queue up on the SEA tarmac using a flight tracking app. Watched the clock hit 7:45. Watched the dot become a line, then curve gently northeast before bending over the edge of the continent toward Europe. Then I opened a new tab. To Brandon Park subject. Effective immediately. I kept it short. 3 sentences. Cited policy. Attached the flagged expense report. CC'd HR and legal. Before hitting send, I opened the chat history Jenna and I had built over 2 years. I scrolled past birthday messages, holiday plans, grocery lists, little inside jokes I'd forgotten. Then I tapped delete conversation. A minute later, I blocked her number. It wasn't revenge. It was just accounting. I sat back watching the icon swirl until the message left my outbox. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't begged. I hadn't even told her I knew. I'd simply let gravity and corporate policy do their work. Seattle, late 2024, I was 34. Monday mornings at our firm start fast. If you're not in before 8, you're already playing catch-up. I'd made partner track early, climbed through the tech org like a cold-blooded algorithm, one rational choice after another. No scandals, no shortcuts, just years of clean execution. That's why I trusted the system more than sentiment, and that's why what happened with Brandon Park stung in a very particular way. He wasn't just another intern. He was part of our summer MBA leadership program. Dozens apply, only 5 make the cut, each one handpicked from top schools. Brandon came from Stanford GSB top percentile, came recommended by someone I trusted. He was the kind of intern that made the full-time staff nervous. Smart enough to ask the right questions, polished enough to make it sound like he was just curious. He didn't overtalk, didn't underdeliver, and most dangerously, he had charm curated, not accidental. That summer, we assigned him to a strategic vendor revamp targeting Western Europe. It was supposed to be high visibility, high discipline, the kind of work that makes or breaks your offer. He shadowed senior directors, took red-eyes to London for workshops. He was sharp, hungry, I was impressed. Which is why I signed off on something we rarely allow a corporate Amex for an intern. I cleared it with legal, finance, and HR. There were controls in place, $10,000 cap linked to our expense portal, every transaction pinged me in real time. I explained the rules: airfare for scheduled site visits, standard lodging, rideshare for client travel, no exceptions. Brandon nodded, repeated the policy back to me. Eyes locked, firm handshake. I'd seen him 2 days before the dinner with Jenna. He'd passed by my office in a navy blazer holding a bottle of imported sparkling water like it was a microphone. Big week, he'd said. I didn't ask questions. Didn't think I needed to. Back at my desk that Monday, I pulled up his file. The charge history painted a different picture than the one he'd projected. Not just the airline and hotel charges. There were clues, names of vendors that had nothing to do with our Brussels partners. Booking confirmations sent to an email I didn't recognize. All tied to one underlying issue. He wasn't traveling alone. That's when the connection locked into place. Jenna had called me 2 weeks prior, said she needed space, said she wanted new air. I thought she meant Oregon. I didn't know she meant Rome with one of my direct reports. The Rome itinerary, now confirmed through booking IDs and timestamps, matched exactly what Jenna had rattled off over ravioli. Same airline, same time, same hotel on Via Veneto. Even the suite tier lined up. He'd used our company card to finance a romantic getaway for my ex. In what universe did he think that wouldn't be traced? I sat in my glass-walled office watching a fog of condensation slide down the panes. My assistant tapped once, then opened the door. Weekly with EVP in 10, she said. Also, card program pinged. They flagged something on the intern's account but held off action pending your nod. I nodded. Tell them to hold one more day. She paused. Everything okay? Policy review, I said flatly. She left without further questions. I needed to act fast but precisely. I wasn't interested in drama. I was interested in documentation. I downloaded the expense report. 3 bold entries: $20,300 for airfare SEA to FCO, $11,480 at Hotel Aurelius Via Veneto, $1,400 withdrawn at a SEA International ATM the evening of the flight. There were minor expenses too: boutique restaurants, designer retail charges, all out of policy, enough to reinforce pattern and intent. I built a short timeline, added screenshots, highlighted inconsistencies between travel declarations and booking confirmations. Then I attached everything to a confidential internal note labeled Case Prep, Brandon P. I wasn't angry. I was aligned. I didn't call Jenna. I didn't call Brandon. I didn't draft a speech about betrayal. That kind of confrontation belongs in sitcoms. This was a compliance issue now. I called HR. I'll be sending a formal request to start a termination file, I told them. We'll wait until the employee is off U.S. soil before executing. There was a pause. Do you believe there's legal risk tied to motive? The HR lead asked carefully. I believe the data speaks for itself, I replied. But yes, let's be clinical. Tight process. No noise. By evening, everything was staged. The terminate draft was written. The receipts were in place. The proof was ready. All I had to do was wait for the plane to cross the ocean. Seattle that same Friday night. I was 34. The rain hadn't stopped all day. It wasn't pouring, just that soft, constant mist Seattle's known for. It settled on windows like a gray film and blurred everything beyond 10 feet. I sat by my desk with the screen light casting long shadows across the room. The plane had just lifted off, but I didn't move. Not yet. I needed confirmation not from the airport app, but from airspace tracking. I needed to know they were truly gone. It came in a quiet ping. Flight SEA to FCO status, en route over North Atlantic. That was my cue. I pulled up the email I drafted earlier that afternoon. Subject line: effective immediately. Policy violation. I didn't add pleasantries. I didn't explain things twice. I attached the flagged expenses and the relevant pages from our employee code. 3 violations: $20,300 for international first-class airfare, $11,480 for a five-star suite booked on Via Veneto. $1,400 withdrawn in cash with no approved travel note attached. Each transaction was time-stamped. None were coded to a business reason. No client initials, no itinerary, no justification. I took a breath. Then I hit send. The email left my outbox with a soft whoosh. Immediately, I opened my contact log for the card program. We had a 24-hour support line, internal only. No waiting music, just a passcode and a team of specialists trained to deal with abuse, fraud, or financial gray zones. When the rep picked up, I kept it simple. Corporate card ending in 7,320, I said. Freeze it now. All outstanding authorizations block. Flag the account for fraud pending investigation. Initiate chargeback review. Yes, sir, the woman replied calmly. You are the reporting authority listed. Any travel in progress? Rome, I said. They're in the air. There was a pause. Then a click of keys. Understood. We'll notify merchants and suspend all access. A fraud case number will be issued within the hour. Do you wish to be copied on all recovery proceedings? I do. And the cardholder? No further contact. Understood. I hung up. The apartment was quiet. I let the silence linger. There's something strangely sobering about executing a protocol like that. It doesn't feel like vengeance. It feels like a systems check. You build the machine, then you let it run. The paper trail had already started forming behind me. Audit logs, timestamps, expense violations, HR notations. All I'd done was initiate gravity. I turned back to my desk, opened the folder labeled Case Brandon P. Inside was everything I needed for Monday. The screenshot of the 3 key charges. The booking confirmations with traveler names. The cross-reference between his time-off request and the trip date. The Slack message he sent me 2 days ago. Cleared my deliverables heading into a quiet weekend. No travel. That one would come in handy. Then there was a sticky note I'd scribbled earlier that week. Do not confuse visibility with value. I stuck it at the top of the file. At 10:30, I poured myself a coffee, not out of need but routine. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It buzzed again, and again. Same number. Then a message. Hi, please pick up. We're stuck. This is serious. Brandon. Probably from an airport kiosk. Maybe Jenna was there too, watching the screen flash declined over and over. I didn't reply. I opened my HR software instead and updated his employee record status terminated pending documentation. I forwarded the termination notice to legal and HR. Then I blocked his number same way I'd blocked hers. I didn't need their side of the story. I had the data. I didn't owe them a conversation. I owed the company a closed loop. I returned to the expense portal one more time and toggled a setting. Any pending transactions Brandon had initiated would now be marked contested. Merchants would be notified that reimbursement was frozen. Any attempt to recharge would route to legal. Quiet systems? No noise. No scene. By midnight, I'd archived the entire email thread, closed every tab, shut the laptop, and for the first time in 48 hours, I breathed. Rome that same night, I was 34. The jet crossed the Atlantic, while Seattle slept under a wet November sky. By the time the wheels touched down at Fiumicino, Rome was glowing gold. Streetlights threw long reflections onto slick stone roads. The early morning hush had just enough chill to remind you this wasn't a vacation postcard. Brandon and Jenna had no idea what was waiting. They cleared immigration easily enough, U.S. passports, tourist smiles. No checked luggage. Brandon had always moved light like someone with nothing to hide. Outside, a black car waited to take them to the Via Veneto district. I knew the hotel. I'd stayed there myself 3 years ago for a tech summit. Crystal lobby, marble floors. Concierge who remembered your name after one greeting. Not the kind of place that asked too many questions unless your payment bounced. They arrived around 7:30 local time. Brandon stepped forward to check in, pulled out the same black Amex card I'd approved 5 months ago. He slid it across the counter, likely with a practiced smile. The concierge keyed in the reservation, then paused. A second later, the screen blinked declined. He tried again. Same result. He asked to speak to a manager, showed his phone, the confirmation email, even the itinerary with his name on it. Jenna waited off to the side, arms crossed, growing visibly annoyed. Another attempt, this time with a different card, his personal one. But his limit wasn't even close to the hold required for a 5-star suite booked under corporate credentials. The room had already been released. They didn't yell. That's not Brandon's style. But the shift was visible. The charm began to slide. The concierge was polite, firm, immovable. No valid card. No valid stay. I wasn't there, but I saw it unfold through reports later through incident summaries and merchant flag returns. They left the hotel with nothing booked, no backup plan, and no clue what had just detonated beneath them. Back in Seattle, it was just past 10 at night. I was reading a quarterly briefing when my phone vibrated. A string of missed calls. One from Brandon, two from Jenna, another from an international number. I didn't answer. Then a message came through. "We're having an issue. Please call. Not sure what's going on." I muted the thread. 5 minutes later, another message. "This one more urgent. We're stranded. Hotel says card invalid. Can you please advise?" I stared at the screen, then typed a reply. "Sounds like a personal issue. Please direct all communication to HR. I'm unavailable outside of internal policy channels." I hit send. Then I archived the thread. Permanently. At that moment, I wasn't angry. I wasn't proud either. I just felt finished. I'd played every step clean. The email had gone out when the flight was over international waters. The card freeze was logged and timestamped. The fraud case was already pending. The termination note had been acknowledged by legal. There was nothing left to say. Still, I knew what this moment meant. This was the moment where their illusions collapsed. The vacation fantasy snapped under the weight of a simple truth: actions carry cost. I imagined the scene. Brandon pacing outside the hotel trying to hotspot his phone to pull up alternate lodging. Jenna silently fuming. Neither one prepared to pay out of pocket because both had believed they wouldn't need to. It wasn't cruel. It was compliance. And it worked. By the next morning, they'd found a low-tier inn 15 blocks away, booked under Jenna's name with her emergency credit line. Their 5-star weekend had downgraded to budget reality. Back at the office, I opened the HRIS portal and updated Brandon's file to reflect termination executed. I appended the flagged charges, the chat logs, the screenshots from the expense portal. I scheduled a meeting with EVP and legal for Monday morning. Then I took one last step. I logged into the chargeback system, linked to our corporate account, and flagged all 3 key transactions as unauthorized use, non-business. The status updated in real time: $20,300. Pending dispute $11,480. Pending reversal $1,400. Under review. I exhaled slowly. The system had taken over. Now, all that remained was to let the consequences land where they needed to. I shut my laptop and looked out the window. The rain had stopped. The city below was still the lights reflecting in puddles that had begun to dry. Nothing had exploded. No shouting. No courtroom. Just quiet boundaries and a single frozen card that rewrote everything. Seattle the following Monday, I was 34. I arrived at the office an hour earlier than usual. There's something about walking into a quiet building after a storm. The lights hadn't fully come on. Elevators still ran in maintenance mode. But I knew that by 9 my inbox would flood, legal would request documentation, and HR would need closure. I was ready. The receptionist looked up from her screen as I walked past. "Morning, Ethan." I nodded, not stopping. The meeting was set for 8:30. Executive Vice President HR lead legal liaison and me. I didn't need notes, I had documentation. In the glass conference room, the city was just waking up. I slid my laptop onto the table and waited. They filed in a few minutes later, coffees and hand folders tucked under arms. The EVP gave a curt nod. "Let's talk about Brandon Park." I didn't waste time. 3 primary violations, I said. First, airfare, $20,300 for first-class seats to Rome, no business justification. Second, a hotel suite on Via Veneto, $11,480, booked without travel authorization. Third, a $1,400 cash withdrawal outside policy, with no supporting documentation. I clicked through the portal screenshots, each one time-stamped and flagged. Chargeback case already opened with card program, I continued. Card frozen as of Friday night. Expenses locked from posting. All further contact redirected through internal channels. Legal was scribbling notes. Was termination executed while in transit? The HR lead asked. Yes. Email sent post-takeoff when aircraft cleared U.S. airspace. Timestamp logged. Any personal retaliation claims pending? None so far, I said, but I expect post-factum excuses. That's why I've preserved Slack threads time-off requests and mapped everything to company policy. The EVP leaned forward. And Jenna? She's not a company asset, I said plainly, but she's now demanding property and circulating mischaracterizations. Cease and desist is drafted. The room was silent for a beat. Legal cleared her throat. We're prepared to issue a formal demand letter for reimbursement. Total recovery sought is between $33,000 and $35,000, depending on chargeback resolution timelines. We'll list each line item with supporting receipts. I nodded. Loop me on all communications. The HR lead raised a brow. You're comfortable having no further direct contact. I gave a single nod. I don't want to speak to either of them again. Everything goes through process now. The EVP pushed a stapled packet across the table. This will be your final approval form for Brandon's blacklist designation. It prevents him from reapplying or being referred for any future role under our corporate umbrella, including subsidiaries. I signed it without pause. This wasn't revenge. This was a boundary. I walked out of the room 10 minutes later. The sky outside was the color of a steel countertop. Cold, clean, clouded but steady. At my desk, I opened the final draft of the demand letter. It was concise. Amount $33,800. Items airfare, hotel cash, and secondary incidentals. Deadline 10 business days from receipt. Réponse channel, légal CICED, HR. Attached were the full receipts, expense logs, and card provider memos. The tone was professional. No insults, no accusations. Just the math. I clicked approve. Then I reopened Brandon's personnel file and updated the termination status to finalized for cause. Attached the signed blacklist form. Checked the flag that prevents future credentialing in our vendor systems. A moment later, my email pinged. Subject D notification. Candidate conduct concern. Legal had drafted a formal letter to Brandon's MBA program. It didn't editorialize. It simply explained that an intern under their supervision had misused corporate resources, been terminated for cause, and was under financial remediation. I didn't take satisfaction in that, but I took closure. By noon, all official steps were done. I closed the case file, encrypted the folder, and set a 6-month archive hold. Then I left for lunch. Not with a colleague. Alone. I didn't need applause. I needed air. I walked a few blocks to a coffee shop that didn't ask questions. Sat by the window. Let the clink of cups and low murmur of conversations push the weekend out of my mind. Brandon was across the ocean in debt and out of options. Jenna was nowhere near my calendar. And I had reclaimed my name from their choices. Seattle, later that same week, I was 34. By Friday, the office had returned to its usual rhythm. People still spoke in hushed hallway tones about what had happened, but not directly to me. The leadership team kept it professional. HR didn't need clarifications. Legal didn't request edits. The machine had processed the breach, and now it was repairing itself. That's what stability looks like in a well-built system. I sat in a quiet conference room reviewing our Q1 budgets, forecasting travel allocations, tightening expense categories, and refining approvals. It was tedious work, but after the Rome incident, I welcomed tedium like an old friend. I'd also proposed a new internal guideline. Nothing drastic, just a clause. Interns and short-term project contributors shall not be issued independent corporate cards. Any expense coverage shall route through designated approvers. No one objected. By week's end, the EVP forwarded me a one-line email. Policy reviewed. Approved. Thank you for closing the loop. Just like that. I didn't respond with thanks. Just noted the timestamp, saved it to my folder, and closed the thread. One day later, our card program team sent me a chargeback update. The subject line read, Chargeback Progress. Brandon Park Case. 148 to 9 tons. Inside the email laid it out clearly. $20,300 airfare chargeback in motion. Merchant notified. $11,480 hotel reversal flagged. Hotel confirmed card invalid. $1,400 cash advance under legal review. ATM vendor notified. Total $33,180 in progress. Expected time to resolution 2 to 4 weeks. That's when it hit me. Not the cost, but the quiet efficiency. We hadn't yelled, we hadn't sued, we hadn't sent threatening texts or staged confrontations. We'd just followed the policies we said we would. Consequences without volume. Around noon that day, another message came through, this time from HR. Brandon had responded. Formally. Through our designated channel. The reply was exactly one paragraph. He expressed regret for any misunderstanding, claimed that certain transactions were intended for shared team use, and requested a chance to provide clarification and partial restitution if necessary. I didn't flinch, nor did Legal. They issued a short reply. Please direct all restitution offers to the address listed in your demand letter. Do not contact internal parties further. That was it. His access had already been revoked, his records locked. his presence scrubbed from shared systems. The only thing that remained was the outstanding balance and a shrinking window to resolve it voluntarily. Later that day, I received an update on the dean notification from his MBA program. The acknowledgement was brief but direct. Thank you for informing our office. We take conduct under internship supervision seriously. Your documentation has been added to the candidate's file and will be reviewed by the Academic Integrity Board. No drama, no thanks required. They were handling it just like we had. By Friday evening, I stood by the window of my office watching the city begin to glitter with weekend lights. Seattle in the late fall always struck me as oddly serene, part gray, part gold. Streetcars humming, people shuffling with coffees in gloved hands, the whole world pretending not to be watching. I had no more texts from Jenna. No missed calls from Brandon. No interruptions. My inbox was clean. My team was focused. My name was clear. That night I walked home without checking over my shoulder. Seattle 1 week later, I was still 34. The first envelope went out Monday morning. Not certified, not theatrical, just a standard white legal envelope stamped, scanned, and recorded. Inside was our demand letter prepared jointly by Legal and Finance. It wasn't long or emotional, just facts. Corporate card misuse, unauthorized charge, violation of internship terms, balance owed $33,180, payment options and deadline, notification of civil action if unfulfilled. The address on file matched his current lease from HR's onboarding form. By Tuesday, a second envelope went out, this time to the dean of his MBA program. It included our formal complaint of unethical conduct under professional supervision. Attached were timestamps, itemized charges, and signed documentation from our finance VP confirming misuse during an official company internship. No rage, no defamation. Just please consider this conduct in your internal review of the candidate's standing. I didn't need to write a cover letter. The facts spoke for themselves. Wednesday, HR sent one final letter, this time to Jenna's personal email, the one she'd used when signing our contractor NDA. The message wasn't long. It stated clearly that we were aware of her unauthorized use of company funds and systems. It confirmed that Brandon's actions implicated her directly through evidence provided by him, and it issued a cease and desist, no further use of company assets, names, logos, or client materials in any future engagements. Attached was a copy of her signed non-disclosure with the relevant clause highlighted. I'd reviewed it twice. The tone was clinical. No anger, no guilt, just process. By Thursday, I was copied on a chain from the university registrar. They had opened an investigation. Brandon had been asked to appear for a preliminary hearing with the Academic Conduct Board. I didn't need to attend. My part was done. That evening, I found myself sitting at my usual coffee shop, the kind with brick walls and quiet lamps. I ordered the same drink as always, drip no sugar, and opened my laptop. In my inbox sat a single message from Legal Execution Complete. We'll monitor for response. I closed the lid. And I didn't think about Brandon again for a long time. 6 weeks later, still 34, but different. It was late October when I finally heard. Not from Brandon, not from Jenna, but from an admin assistant at the university who'd handled my internship paperwork. The email was short. Candidate has been formally removed from program. Thank you again for your cooperation. That was it. No grand punishment, no splashy hearing, just a quiet line in a plain email delivered like a footnote to the story. I didn't reply. By then, I'd already noticed what wasn't happening. There were no new updates on Jenna's website. Her LinkedIn had gone dark. The consulting collective they tried to build was nowhere to be found. Just gone. I searched once just to confirm, and then I stopped checking. What they did wasn't spectacular. It wasn't headline-worthy. It was sloppy, predictable, and selfish. And in the end, it failed quietly. There were no apologies, no last words, no final messages. Just absence. But I'd take that over drama any day. That month, I also received a final update from Legal Matter Closed. No further action necessary. Finance had sent the final invoice for the unpaid balance. Whether Brandon paid or not was now between him and collections. I didn't need the money back. I needed the boundary enforced. And it was. But the strangest part of it all wasn't their silence or the consequences. It was how normal life became again, like the mess had never existed. I kept the same desk, the same coffee shop, the same seat at the nonprofit board where Brandon had pitched his empty ideas. And yet everything felt stable. I no longer checked over my shoulder for betrayal in disguise. I no longer flinched at every clever-sounding proposal. And I no longer mistook charm for character. I didn't trust slower. I trusted sharper. Not more skeptical, just more refined. People ask me if I ever miss them, if part of me regrets not confronting them face to face. But the truth is, confrontation wasn't the point. Distance was. Boundaries were. Silence was. Letting their own actions unravel them was the quietest, most complete answer I could ever give. That's the part no one warns you about when you grow up. Justice doesn't always thunder. Sometimes it just removes. There's a strange kind of peace in knowing you did nothing loud and still came out whole. I never raised my voice. I never demanded an apology. I didn't seek revenge. I simply documented, drew a line, and let the facts do the speaking. And that changed everything. If there's one thing this entire experience taught me, it's that truth doesn't always need to shout. Sometimes it just needs to be shown clearly, patiently, and without fear. People like Brandon and Jenna count on chaos. They expect you to yell panic, lash out, because that gives them more noise to hide behind. But when you take away the noise, they disappear in their own silence. To anyone out there feeling used, ignored, or quietly erased by the people you trusted, you are not powerless. You don't have to match their behavior. You don't have to become bitter. You just have to be precise. Set your line, keep your records, and trust that enough still means enough even if no one else claps for it. If you've ever chosen quiet boundaries over public blowups, I'd love to hear your story. And if this one meant something to you, maybe consider subscribing. I've learned a lot the hard way, and I'm finally ready to share it.